we are currently in round 8. We're part of the way through round 8, but as you'll see from the resource grid table, the Norman foe has resource value of 3. But if we check the battlefield, you'll see they have 1 green resource rosette here, so that means they have a resource value total of 4. So they can afford cards that cost 4 or less. Now I wanted to show you what happens when the battlefield is full on the foe side. When the battlefield is full on the foe side, they will obviously first try and do their range attacks. They have already been done this round, so no need to worry about that this time. So they then try to deploy their card as usual. Now it's a cost of 4 or less, so they can't afford that one, so that's simply discarded. Now they can afford this one, but can they deploy it? If they can deploy it, all they have to do is replace a lower cost card. There is only one card that costs lower than 2 on the battlefield, and that is William up here. He costs 1, so he will simply be replaced with Gerald on the battlefield there. So now Gerald has a when played ability, so deal 1 damage to 1 non-enemy leader. Sorry, to 1 non-leader enemy. And as usual, we must target ranged attack units first, and so the old Stealthy Spearmen will take 1 damage from Gerald there. That was the foe's deployment turn, so back to us, and I am going to deploy Godric here. He costs 2, so to pay for Godric I will discard these 2 cards, and Godric gets placed on the field there. When played unit, draw 1 card, so I draw a card for myself, get a nice magnet support there. Play passes back to the foe, no ranged attacks to do, and they are still affording 4 cards that cost 4 or less. We can afford Walter here, because he only costs 2, but there are no cards that cost less than 2, as we found out last time. So what happens is Walter then gets discarded, and because we could afford him but we didn't play him, or we kind of chose not to play him, that is the end of the Normans' turn that time. So play passes back to the Saxons. So I'm going to put the English Bishop's tactic into play, and I'm going to pay for it with the magnet support. So get rid of her and play English Bishops as a tactic on here. So then play turns back to the Normans, and they will again try to deploy a card. That is a cost of 2. So, and in fact it's an event, so we don't even have to worry about putting it on the battlefield. It'll just take place. And the event is destroy 1 enemy unit with 1 Zeal, with Zeal 1 or lower. Now it has to be a unit, so I can't do any characters. So that unit there, Saxon X-Men, you are gone. Destroyed by rout the enemy. That was the Normans' turn. Back to us. I've only got 1 card left. I do have an action left. I will do the English Bishop's action just to show you that. That'll tire, and that'll place 1 Zeal on a Saxon unit or character. So let's throw it on Godric, who came on. He's come on with his Zeal just now. Right, so foe's deployment turn. And we go to the cards again, and that could be costed, and you can play a card, only costs 1, so that's going to be, and it's an event, so don't have to worry about place on the battlefield. Play 1 card at cost -3, so that means with the 4 we can afford anything. So this is a 2, can afford that, but we know we cannot replace a 2 on the battlefield. Now, if this was a ranged unit, ranged units prioritize, they can replace the cards of the same cost. So a ranged unit doesn't have to be a lower value, it can be the same value. So in this case, if imagine this was a ranged unit, we would in actual fact replace Gerald up here, because he is the only 2. We wouldn't replace this one because ranged units never get replaced on the battlefield. So if this was a new range unit that came out and it cost 2, it would replace Gerald up here. Even though Gerald has only just appeared in the battle, they would be replaced there because that's how valuable range units are. But it's not. We could afford him. We can't place him on the battlefield. So in that case, he is simply discarded, and play returns to the Saxons. I can't remember now. Did I pass or did I use my? Either way, if I didn't pass last time, I think I used my English bishop, didn't I? So I'm going to have to pass this time, as I have nothing else to do. And again, play returns to the foe. They get one last action. Well, because they have their... And this would be another event. Deal 1 damage to the enemy leader's wedge. Simple, done, boom. Put the correct colour on this time. Enemy leader's wedge. They've already got a damage out, and that is the end of their turn. So then you'd go to the wedge phase. No one is at Hastings yet. So we move on to the objective phase, and we would count up the might on the battlefield for the Normans and take away 2, and count up the might on the battlefield for the Saxons and take away 2, and hopefully they will have both destroyed those objectives and moved on to the next one. Let me see now. Yes, and don't forget, when you are replacing lower cost cards, if there is a tie and it is a ranged unit, they will prioritise the same wedge as the enemy leader. So you wouldn't get a choice. Normally it'd be player choice, but you'd have to prioritise the leader's wedge. And the same goes for cavalry. If there's a tie for lowest cost card to replace, and when you're trying to place a cavalry unit, row 3 will be their priority, because they would get +1 in their row 3. So do keep those in mind. Now, when the battle gets to Hastings, there's a slight change again. When it's the foe deployment turn, normally you do a ranged attack first. Now, what you'd have to do in that, if both players are at Hastings, this only happens if both players are at Hastings, both the foe and the player. If both of you are at Hastings and there is a ranged unit in the wedge, what you'd have to do is, let's just quickly imagine we're at Hastings, move the old whatchamacallums for us. So both sides are at Hastings right now, and it is the foe's turn. Normally you would do any ranged attacks. So what would happen though is, with you both at Hastings, you'd have to make a might calculation, and ranged attacks will only happen if the foe is losing the might battle in that wedge at that very moment. So let's have a look for the moment now. The might battle here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, compared to 3, he'd be tired so he doesn't count, and 4, 5. So in fact, they are winning the wedge battle, so they will not use this ranged attack. That's in that wedge too. So you check the other one, and in this wedge they are 2, 4 and 7 for might. Over here it's 1, 3 and 4, so they are winning here as well, so they would not use their ranged attack here. So currently on this turn there's no ranged attack, so they would then look to deploy a card. And then it would pass back to the Saxons and then the foes. And you check again, you check each time. So things can change and be fluid, but keep that in mind, that range attacks will not happen when both players are at Hastings if the foe is losing the might battle in the wedge where the ranged unit is. Hopefully that's all clear. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes, and hopefully my filming wasn't absolutely dreadful. Did feel quite bad, but I was on very poor devices. So I'm going to stop right there. Say thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you got something useful out of this. Any questions, of course, I'll try and answer and clarify anything I fluffed over, which I'm sure there was.